So thanks so much for coming at this busy time. I would love to welcome David Hayes and Jeremy Schwartz to St. John's College. Mr. Hayes and Mr. Schwartz got their doctorates at University of Chicago's Committee on Social Thought, and their collaboration started there. They were reading War and Peace for the core program at Chicago and found themselves talking together so much that they started to sit in on each other's classes and basically team taught it, and the collaboration hasn't stopped. Mr. Hayes now teaches at Bard College Berlin and Mr. Schwartz at Texas Tech University. Mr. Hayes, I'm winging this, so Mr. Hayes teaches Greek philosophy and literature. Mr. Schwartz teaches philosophy, Kant, and ethics. But they continue to collaborate in all sorts of interesting ways. They just published on piety as a virtue. And we're both teaching Shakespeare's King Lear and talking again and arriving at thoughts together. And so decided to try to work some of those thoughts out for us tonight. So I'm so happy that they're here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mozara. Jeremy's actually going to start. We don't know a better way to do this other than to alternate reading the talk. But let me say, both of us have had many friends who attended St. John's or who taught at St. John's, or both, since that's a thing. And so for us, it's an exaggeration to say that to be here feels like coming home, but it's an exaggeration of a truth. So thank you so much for having us.
Hello. So there's a handout tonight, and the handout is kind of like a program guide. It's not very detailed, but there's an argument, and we just wanted you all to be able to see where in the argument you are. So it's very quick, and as we get to those sections, I will remark on where we are. So hopefully that'll help. Okay. Title of the talk is King Lear's Love Test. And we're on part 1, the introduction and Hephaestus' question. In Plato's Symposium, Aristophanes imagines a scene in which the god Hephaestus stands over two lovers as they lie together and ask them what they wish in being at each other's side. The lovers are perplexed. Aristophanes claims that this is because love, unlike other desires, is unclear about what it wants. Famously, Hephaestus suggests that what lovers really want is to, quote, be in the same place with each other as much as possible, so that you are not parted from each other night and day. And that he is ready to fill this desire by fusing the lovers together into one person. Despite Socrates' famous criticism of this view, it is fair to say that Aristophanes' view of romantic love carried and continues to carry the day. It carries the day, for example, in the apparent requirement for Shakespeare that a comedy should end in marriage, the non-surgical version of Hephaestus' proposal. And it carries the day in our own contemporary romantic comedies, which end in some sort of coming together of the protagonists, if not their actual marriage. Indeed, we are probably ready to go even further than Plato's Aristophanes and maintain that all kinds of love bring people together, and that the strength of any love relationship can be measured by the closeness it achieves. If love, as a force, doesn't bring people together, we may wonder, what else could it possibly do? Push them apart? Suppose, however, that we take Aristophanes' pair of erotic lovers and change them to a loving parent and a child. Let's make the child 18 years old and make it the first day of college. As parent and child cling to each other in the dormitory parking lot, Hephaestus appears before them with his tools. And again he asks, what is it that you human beings want in clinging together? It is obvious that the answer to this question could not be union of either the surgical or marital variety. Indeed, even closeness would be a vexed answer. For look, there is college with its new friends, possibilities for romantic love, and even new interesting adults to talk to. And both parent and child want those things for the child, don't they? If parental love is a force, doesn't the noblest variety of it hold the child close in order to prepare them for eventual separation? And if filial love is a force, doesn't the healthiest version detach from its initial object in order to transfer to a new one? Indeed, it is unsafe to even assume that parents and children share a love that wants the same thing. Hephaestus already assumed the answer to his question by addressing the human beings together as one, quote, you, already united in their aims. In the case of parents and children, we may not need one but two versions of Hephaestus' question. What do you want, parent, in loving your child? And what do you want, child, in loving your parent? Is there one question here or two? And what are the answers to these questions? In the case of erotic love, we are blessed with a long tradition, including Plato, to help us reflect on the content of our desire. In the case of parent-child love, the tradition has not bequeathed us much. We are, however, blessed with King Lear, an extended meditation on parent-child love. With Hephaestus' question in mind and with Shakespeare's help, our hope is to get clear on the difficulty, depth, and potentially tragic character of the phenomenon. Okay, so now we're at part two. Part two is why a love test. Within 50 lines of the opening of the play, King Lear, hereafter just Lear, in order to distinguish him from the title of the play, reveals a secret plan to divide his kingdom into 3 unequal parts. The allotment of parts, he announces, will be determined by a kind of test or contest. Each of Lear's daughters should say how much she loves him, with the best part of the kingdom to go to the daughter that, quote, doth love us most. As has been noted, the fact that Lear starts handing out each daughter's portions before he has heard all of the speeches undermines the point of a genuine contest. Indeed, that Kent and Gloucester open the play by showing knowledge of Lear's intention to divide the kingdom suggests that Lear has put substantial thought into the political dimensions of the division, and that his love test may be more like a stage performance than a genuine test. Nevertheless, the stage performance turns out to be a real test, since Cordelia fails it, first by apparently refusing to speak, and then by giving a speech that angers Lear so much that he furiously casts her off, disclaiming his paternity and giving her pre-designated largest portion of the kingdom over to be, quote, digested by his other 2 daughters. All the disastrous consequences in the play follow from these actions, which are completed with incredible speed by 120 lines. What actually happens in these 120 lines? How should we understand the point of Lear's apparently fake contest? Why is his response to Cordelia so quick and so furious? The puzzles are well recognized by commentators in the play. Indeed, the characters in the play are themselves manifestly puzzled. Lear's faithful advisor Kent calls him, quote, mad, and in, quote, old man, calls his actions, quote, folly, expressing, quote, hideous rashness, that, quote, dost evil. For his intervention, Kent too is banished from England. France, one of Cordelia's 2 sinners, can scarcely believe it. This is most strange, that she who even but now was your best object, the argument of your praise, balm of your age, the best, the dearest, should in this trice of time commit a thing so monstrous to dismantle so many folds of favor. With his apparent license to speak truth to power, the fool heaps a torrent of abuse on Lear for what he's done, especially for giving away his power at all, and thereby having made, quote, thy daughters thy mothers. Even Goneril and Regan, the beneficiary of Lear's folly, take his action as a sign that, quote, the infirmity of age is having drastic effects on his poor judgment. All this is to say that for the characters in the play, there is really no explanation for what Lear has done. Some commentators in the play have not done much better. To this day, Regan and Goneril's interpretation that Lear is just old and losing his mind is the popular one. A better approach begins by noticing the fairy tale or mythic quality of the opening, quote, love test, with its 2 wicked old daughters and a youngest, smallest good one. Following Northrop Frye, following Aristotle, we think that this mythic quality speaks to literature's concern with, quote, what always happens, as opposed to history, which tells what happened. In other words, rather than begin with what is inexplicable in what Lear does, we should try to begin with what is so typical that it seems universal. Looked at in this spirit, King Lear begins with an old man at a special moment in his life. It is the moment in which he looks ahead to his remaining time, trying to make that remaining time the object of a thought-out plan. Central to that plan is his children, which of them will take care of him, and what their relationship will look like. Lear himself sketches the outline of his plan. 'Tis our fast intent to shake all cares and business from our age, conferring them on younger strengths, while we unburdened crawl toward death. Later, Lear reveals that in particular he intends to spend his time exclusively with his favorite daughter, Cordelia, intending to, quote, set my rest on her kind nursery. If his behavior at Goneril's house is any indication of what his rest might look like, it will involve hunting and carousing, with his retinue and depending on his children and their servants to ensure his ease. This plan is unsurprising and we think unobjectionable, even traditional in its elements. The parent retires from the cares of the world. He spends time with his friends, reliving, to the extent he can, the most pleasant parts of his youth. Otherwise, he lives with the child, the favorite one in particular, who takes care of him in, quote, kind nursery. This is the only use of the word nursery in Shakespeare that doesn't mean a mother nursing her child. Or maybe this is no exception. Lear expects his needs to be met, including eventually the very basic physical needs that the very old typically need help with. If he is being optimistic about his daughter, Lear is also being realistic about himself. What the fool considers an abusive accusation, that Lear made his daughters his mothers, is just the plan all along. A typical contemporary version of this plan, to hire someone else's children to be our parents' caregivers, distributes the burden elsewhere rather than foolishly denying reality. Although we don't see anything wrong with Lear's plan, we have referred to it as a sketch because it is missing something central, namely the ground of this relationship from the child's point of view. The parental love that happens in the nursery, though challenging, has its own rewards, but what should motivate grown children to take care of their now childlike parents? To say the answer is love is correct, of course, but begs the central question, what sort of love in the child grounds the tender care that parents require in their dotage, to use the word favored by Goneril? This we take it as Lear's guiding concern in his love test. Now that I am no longer going to have power over you, or the power to care for you, what sort of love will you have for me? Because of the way things turn out for Lear, it is tempting to think that everything about his plan is problematic. Perhaps Lear is trying to shirk his responsibilities as a king and a father. Perhaps it is unfair of him to think he can burn Cordelia exclusively. Or perhaps he's just being foolish to give up his power at all. This view is repeatedly voiced in the play by the character the Fool, who puts his practical wisdom into a catchy jingle. This is number 1 on the handout. Fathers that wear rags do make their children blind, but fathers that bear bags shall see their children kind. In other words, if you want kindness from your children, be sure to hold on to your money to the end. If the fool's worldview is accepted, perhaps all people in positions of power should hold on as long as possible, for it is only their power that ensures kind treatment. We ought to see that Lear's plan is trying to do better than the fool's, quote, truth. We should appreciate his attempt to avoid the common human vice of trying to hold on too long. That the fool's view is not the play's view can also be seen by noting that the very same intergenerational antagonism that the fool expresses is used by Edmund to sow distrust between his half-brother Edgar and their father Gloucester. In the fake letter that he forges in Edgar's name, he writes, and this is number 2 in your handout, "This policy and reverence of age makes the world bitter to the best of our times, keeps our fortunes from us till our oldness cannot relish them. I begin to find an idle and fond bondage in the oppression of aged tyranny, who sways not as it hath power, but as it is suffered." Notice how the passage is pitched at a general level. According to Edmund, Edgar speaks for all children of parents holding on to their wealth and power. That Gloucester, who opens the play, avowing love for both of his sons, would fall prey to this crude deception is quite surprising. Gloucester's sudden credulousness is accounted for if we assume that Edmund has hit upon one of his father's deep fears. If the fool is right that parents and kings ought to hold on to power as long as they can, then children will naturally come to see themselves as suffering from the oppression of aged tyranny. Gloucester's credulousness shows that the fool and the fake Edgar advance a view that is both cynical and plausible. However, when we reflect that it is not intergenerational tension that dooms Gloucester, but his own readiness to believe in this tension, we put daylight in between this worldview and Shakespeare's. In short, the cause of Lear's suffering is not that he fails to hold a painfully normal, cynical view. While the very fact of Lear's willing retirement shows that he does not hold the fool's cynical worldview, his love test betrays anxiety that something like it might be true. He is unsure enough of the ground of the care he is planning for from his children that he wants to hear something from them just before he surrenders his power. Lear is ready to avoid the vice of hanging on to the end if he receives some words to the effect that he is loved and how. But as we have indicated in the beginning of this talk, there is a mystery concerning the how of filial love. We all know roughly what an ideal speech of romantic love is supposed to look like. If our own romantic partners showed anxiety about our love, we would all be able to say something. But what does an ideal speech of filial love look like? We do not know. Cordelia also does not know. Lear also does not know. The difference between our respective ignorance is that Lear's ignorance is a problem for him, as he tends to give up his power, because he is poised to rely upon something that lacks an articulate shape. Okay, I'm going to pause.
This is part 3. 3 pictures of filial love. 1. Filial love is a romantic love. We have noticed that filial love has no long tradition of poetry to draw upon in describing the way it feels. It is no wonder, then, that Regan and Goneril choose to ape romantic love poetry in their responses to Lear's love test. Accordingly, Goneril loves her father, quote, more than words can wield the matter, dearer than eyes, space, or liberty. And Regan loves her father so much that she professes herself, quote, an enemy to all other joys which the most precious square of sense professes, and finds herself, quote, alone felicited in your dear highness's love. What these professions ape is the medieval troubadours' worshipful, exclusive, wholehearted, and hyperbolic devotion to their beloved. As a vision of filial love, this is not very tempting. Furthermore, because it is touching on the incest taboo, it has a strong yuck factor. But notice that it's possible to draw connections between romantic or erotic love and parent-child love. Indeed, Aristophanes' articulation of the romantic idea depends upon parent-child love for its force. Recall that in his myth, we were all originally circle people with 4 arms and 4 legs, and that erotic love was born when we were halved, and that we should all now contemplate our navels in order to grasp that we were once halves of wholes. What this myth references is the biological truth that we were once united with our mothers, and that our separation from her was a kind of trauma. What deep romantic or erotic longing turns out to be, in its desire to reunite with our natural other half, is just filial love, albeit for a mother only. One could also flip it around and describe it as parental, the desire to reunite with an unborn child, which an alien force, rather than one's will, caused to be born and therefore separated. If Aristophanes is right, it should not be hard to describe filial love. What should be hard is to distinguish romantic love from it, for the overwhelmingly natural love is filial. In short, what Aristophanes' myth suggests is that Goneril and Regan's speeches may be fine after all. Perhaps proper filial love, stripped of its sexual implications, can absolutely be modeled on the idea of romantic love. However, we think that Cordelia hits on the key criticism when she says, why have my sisters husbands if they say they love you all? In Aristophanes' original story, the longing for union is so intense that the 2 separated halves die of hunger because they're unwilling to part. Zeus takes pity on them, rearranging their biology again so that they can have sex. And this gives them a little satiety so they can disentwine and do the work necessary for living. Regan proposes this kind of love, but without any of the satiety, and Cordelia calls her on it. Indeed, if Regan is to believe that she's only happy in her father's presence, it's hard to see why she has any ambitions or does anything at all. And looked at from the other side, it's hard to imagine that a parent's greatest wish for a child is just for that child to stay permanently in their presence, never wanting anything other than to cling as tightly as possible. 2. Filial love as gratitude. Cordelia is effective at undermining her sister's romantic visions of filial love. Does Cordelia have anything to offer instead? We will argue that Cordelia offers filial love based on gratitude, and that when Lear rejects this, he's rejecting this picture because it is based on gratitude. To fully appreciate what Lear is rejecting and why, we're going to have to discuss gratitude itself. We'll need to see how much Cordelia gets right, how powerful her image is, and therefore what's at stake in rejecting it. Before offering anything that Lear can reject, however, Cordelia is initially silent. Indeed, her initial reluctance is one of the key mysteries of the scene. Lear himself attributes her whole response to, quote, pride, which she calls plainness. And it's tempting to follow Lear in thinking that Cordelia is at least somewhat at fault for her reluctance, and the whole tragedy could just have been avoided if Cordelia had brought herself to say some pretty words. Without depriving Cordelia of pride, let's give her more credit here. When she says to herself, what shall Cordelia speak? She's asking the central question of this talk applied to her own case. What does filial love want? And therefore, what would a successful statement of that love look like? Lacking a tradition of filial love literature, Cordelia has no words for the understandable reason that we have no words. Therefore, love and be silent. The fact that Cordelia does not stand pat with this answer is also to her credit. She sees a need to say something, whether this is because she grants some legitimacy to her father's anxiety, or because she grants that love should be able to be conveyed to the loved one somehow, and that silence doesn't convey it very well. Therefore, she makes a second attempt. This is number 3 on your handout. Unhappy that I am, I cannot heave my heart into my mouth. I love your majesty according to my bond, no more, no less. And what kind of bond does Cordelia have in mind? She goes on to explain that the bond is grounded in what Lear has given to her, and in particular what he has given to her in his fatherly capacity. It is the bond of filial gratitude. This is number 4 on your handout. Good my lord, you have begot me, bred me, loved me. I return those duties back as our right fit, obey you, love you, and most honor you. According to Cordelia, her feelings for her father neither exceed nor fall short of what is appropriate for a child to feel toward a father who sired her, educated, and loved her. Her love is returned back in virtue of these great gifts that her father gave her. Since Cordelia sees her love as a return for conferred benefits, it can be understood as a form of gratitude. Parents give children a lot, and Lear seems to be a good parent who's given more than most. You can contrast Gloucester. Cordelia is saying that she owes Lear gratitude for all that he's given her, and we think she's not wrong. Interpreters of the play have noticed that Cordelia's obey you, love you, and most honor you echo the wedding vows from the Book of Common Prayer, in which the bride promises to love, cherish, and to obey her husband. This is number 5 on the handout. Although the echo is clear, it's good to note that Cordelia also revised the text. First, she reversed the order, placing obedience at the head of the list rather than the last. What fathers are owed first and foremost is obedience rather than love. Second, Cordelia changes cherish to most honor. The second change is consistent with her first. This is because honoring is closer to obeying, and cherishing is closer to loving. Although Cordelia reaches for and finds a pattern for her articulation of filial love in married love, she has also altered that pattern in a way that promotes honor and obedience in the relationship and diminishes the warmer cherishing of the love, without, however, we think, destroying it. Cordelia does manage, to a certain extent, to heave her heart into her mouth, and what she expresses is a relationship based on gratitude for the tremendous benefits that her father has bestowed on her. And this departs from readings in which understand Cordelia to be pridefully withholding or painfully confused. Our reading is supported by her growing confidence in her own answer under pressure from her father. When asked whether her heart goes with this, she replies, "Aye, my good lord." And when again Lear accuses her of being untender for someone so young, she replies, "So young, my lord, and true." Lear's accusation that the answer is prideful also speaks against it being confused. Finally, consider that Kent himself praises not only Cordelia but also her speech. "The gods to their dear shelter take thee, maid, that justly thinks and has most rightly said." There is something impressive in Cordelia's speech. If Lear's question is, "How will you love me after I have nothing left to give you?" gratitude describes the way in which we continue to respond to benefits after they've been received and without expectation of more. But if Cordelia's reply is so impressive, why does Lear reject it? Now, it's tempting to appeal to unfavorable understandings of gratitude in order to explain Lear's rejection. Perhaps, for example, there's something too thin about gratitude, that it consists in little more than the rules of good manners, and it's not deep enough to match the love that Lear feels for Cordelia or his need of her love. Or perhaps Cordelia's talk of duties and bonds reflects a certain coldness in gratitude as something that regulates behavior but doesn't touch the heart. We think that the view of gratitude in King Lear sustains neither of these two objections. This is 2a. Is gratitude too cold? Readers have sometimes detected something cold in Cordelia's answer to Lear, probably because he complains she's untender and asks whether her heart goes with it. Furthermore, Cordelia's talk of her bond and of returning her duties can strike modern readers as invoking the cold performance of a duty begrudgingly done. Although there's something to this, there's no reason to believe that Shakespeare would be friendly to the post-Kantian idea that obligations could and maybe should be rendered by the sheer recognition of their rightness. And indeed, this view is especially hard to maintain when it comes to gratitude. Perhaps when it comes to fulfilling promises, the recognition that you are bound to do so is central. The phenomenology of promise-keeping is cold. But gratitude is typically thought to involve our emotions. In order for gratitude to be correct, its expression must be sincere. A person who expresses thanks without feeling them is subject to the criticism that she's not really grateful at all. We think that Cordelia shows that she understands this when she says, "I love your majesty according to my bond," making gratitude the basis of love rather than of some future unloving but correct behavior. 2b, is gratitude unimportant? A central mystery of Act 1 is why Lear casts Cordelia off with such speed and fury. Since what Cordelia offers him is filial love based on gratitude, it would be easy to explain Lear's reaction if he thought gratitude was unimportant. But nothing could be further from the truth. To Lear, gratitude is so important that failing to have it is a kind of monstrousness. After Goneril tries to take away half of his retinue, he says, quote, "Ingratitude, thou marble-hearted fiend, more hideous when thou show'st thee in a child than the sea monster." And again, how sharper than a serpent's tooth it is to have a thankless child. And again, musing to himself, to take it again perforce, monster ingratitude. And even after all this with Goneril, Lear can't quite believe that Regan will also display ingratitude, hopefully averring to her, "Thou, Regan, better know'st the offices of nature, bond of childhood, effects of courtesy, dues of gratitude. Thy half of the kingdom hast thou not forgot, wherein I thee endowed." After Regan proves as ungrateful as Goneril, Lear urges the storm to destroy humanity because of its ingratitude. "And thou, all shaking thunder, strike flat the thick rotundity of the world, crack nature's molds, all Germans spill at once, that make ingrateful man." The storm on the outside is matched on the inside. "This tempest in my mind doth from my senses take all feeling else, save what beats there, filial ingratitude." In summary, and perhaps too much summary, gratitude is so important to Lear that its lack in his two of his daughters shakes him to his very core. And he rejects gratitude as too little to serve as the basis of the love he wants from Cordelia. In fact, the rejection is fully shocking only when we appreciate how highly Lear esteems gratitude and the reasons why he's correct to do so. Compare Lear's worldview to the worldview of intergenerational tension, advocated by Edmund, by the Fool, and by Gloucester in his Suspiciousness. Recall that on the intergenerational tension view, the old cling to power for as long as possible, and the young cannot wait to get out from under their thumbs. What this picture leaves out is that between the old and the young, there are not merely power relations, there are also relationships of beneficence and gratitude. An apparently third possibility would be a relationship in which there was beneficence on the part of the old, but no gratitude on the part of the young. Such a view is dramatized by Shel Silverstein in his horrific The Giving Tree. Such a view isn't really an alternative to the vision of intergenerational tension. It just reverses oppression rather than tension. Oppression, it just reverses it. Now, children squeeze everything they possibly can from their entirely selfless parents all their lives until the latter have nothing left to give. The child reduces the lush tree of his parent to a dry stump, then departs without so much as a goodbye, much less a thank you. Fortunately, we think that the power wielded by the old is often directed for the benefit of the young, and that the young are often grateful. In the history of philosophy, gratitude has a checkered past. Extolled above all other virtues by philosophers like Cicero and Hume, and held in suspicion by others like Nietzsche. The Hume or the Cicero of King Lear's Albany, who says, quote, "That nature which condemns its origin cannot be bordered certain in itself. And that if ingratitude goes unpunished, quote, humanity must perforce prey on itself, like monsters of the deep." For Albany, gratitude is foundational for both psychological and political stability. Although the play seems to back up his view, since the ungrateful Goneril and Regan eventually turn on each other, the greatest psychological destabilization occurs not in the ungrateful, but in Lear's experience as a benefactor who meets with ingratitude. We can say that for Lear, gratitude is a sort of baseline. From Cordelia, he expected more than gratitude and is outraged he doesn't get it. From Goneril and Regan, he expects at least this and is outraged and shaken when he doesn't get this much.
All right. Okay, so now we are at 2C in the handout, titled "Who is it that can tell me who I am?" All right. And just a warning, this is a long one, okay? To understand Lear's motivation, we must think about the extremity of his reaction. Not only banishing and disowning Cordelia, but also banishing anyone who dares defend her. It seems bizarre to respond to "thank you" with "how dare you." Whatever is motivating Lear, it must be deep enough to touch the core of who he is. But who is Lear? Indeed, we see from his interactions with Goneril and Regan that Lear's very identity is the central bone of contention between them. Again and again, as we have seen, Lear complains about their ingratitude, but their rupture is actually brought about by little acts of disrespect carried out to and by their respective servants. Goneril's plan is precisely to provoke Lear by having her servants provoke Lear's knights through, quote, colder looks. To this end, Oswald neglects to greet Lear with an honorific, and when confronted about it, he calls Lear "my lady's father" rather than his king. Oswald precisely hits on the issue. Is Lear still worthy of the respect of a king, or now, having given up his power, is whatever respect he's owed merely derivative of his relationship to Goneril? In fact, from Goneril's point of view, it is Lear who is disrespecting her. If she and Albany really are the monarchs now, then Lear no longer has the right to strike her servants, nor upbraid her when they fail to accommodate his carousing. As Oswald correctly notes, it all depends on who Lear is, the king or the queen's father. This failure to know his place explains why Lear's behavior is continuously irritating to Goneril. This is quote 6, passage 6 on your handout. "By day and night he wrongs me. Every hour he flashes into one gross crime or other that sets us all at odds. I'll not endure it. As king, these behaviors would be tolerated or even to be expected. As queen's father, they are out of bounds. Until there is some understanding of Lear's identity, every interaction is a minefield. In other words, the central conflict between Lear and his daughters is a hermeneutic one, and the central disputed item in the conflict is Lear himself. Who now is Lear? Who are those around him? Lear himself is constantly asking everyone these questions. To disguise Kent, "Dost thou know me, fellow?" To Oswald, "Who am I, sir?" To Goneril, "Are you our daughter?" And his desperate appeal to everyone around him. Does any here know me? Why, this is not Lear. Does Lear walk thus, speak thus? Where are his eyes? Either his notion weakens or his discernings are lethargied. Ha! Sleeping or waking, sure 'tis not so. Who is it that can tell me who I am? The fool's answer here Lear's shadow, appears to support Goneril and Regan's hermeneutic claim because it sounds like shadow of your former self. Lear casts around for answers to this question because there is a sustained attack on his identity and status. From Goneril's point of view, then, it is crucial that Lear accept his new identity and reduce status. Goneril is constantly urging a picture onto Lear of Lear as an old man in his dotage. One of Goneril's favorite words, she seeks multiple times to impose her image of Lear on Lear. As you are old and reverend, should be wise. And, quote, put away these dispositions which of late transport you from what you rightly are. Indeed, for Regan, always one-upping her sister, her father Lear, quote, hath ever but slenderly known himself. Although much is made of her demand that Lear reduces his retinue, it is important to remember that Goneril also demands that the composition of this retinue be changed. This is passage number 7 on your handout. And the remainders that shall still depend to be such men as may besort your age, which know themselves and you. Goneril's final condition may well be the most important of all. Yes, she wants to reduce his retinue and thereby his honor. Yes, she wants to surround him with older, less disordered, debauched, and bold men. But most importantly, she wants to surround him with people who share the same vision of him that she does, a wise perhaps, but above all, weak old man. Regan, of course, follows her sister's lead but goes still further, dropping the polite nods to reverend age or wisdom. This is number 8 on your handout. Oh, sir, you are old. Nature in you stands on the very verge of her confine. You should be ruled and led by some discretion that discerns your state better than you yourself. In a particular vicious twist, Regan tells Lear that his age is affecting his judgment, and in particular on the most important matter, his own condition. Regan captures the sisters' motivations throughout all of their interactions. I pray you, Father, being weak, seem so. Align your self-image with your true condition. Don't act as if you are something other than the old, weak man that you are. And as Goneril points out, Lear had better take them up on their proposal or else she, quote, will take the thing she begs. The image they seek to impose upon Lear is backed up by the threat of force. By the time Lear flees into the storm, the sisters' hermeneutic triumph is nearly complete. Regan and Cornwall refer to him only as, quote, the old man. And both suggest that he is like a foolish child who needs to learn some lessons. Gloucester alone shows us how differently the same behavior might be interpreted. The king is in a high rage, but Gloucester's voice is overwhelmed. There's a practical sense in which Lear must flee because he has nowhere else to go and cannot live on their terms. What we are emphasizing here is the sense in which Lear is fleeing from their vision of him. We have read these scenes as a hermeneutical struggle over who Lear is. Now we move to a stronger claim. In many hermeneutic struggles, there is some fact of the matter that is in dispute. For example, are we correct to read King Lear in the way we are doing right now, or aren't we? Similarly, one might say there is some fact of the matter about who Lear is. The daughters and Lear disagree over this fact, and they fight to have their view of the fact accepted. In the case of Lear's identity, however, we think there's no fact of the matter. Certainly in matters of status, there's no fact who we are that is independent of how others perceive us. If we're received by others as powerful, we have power over them. If we are perceived as weak, then we don't. We think that what holds true about status meaningfully extends to identity. Whoever succeeds in imposing their image of Lear's identity will actually change who Lear is. Obviously, the sisters cannot change medical facts about Lear's age or health, but they can change how Lear's actions are perceived, and this in turn constrains what is possible for him to do. For example, as Lear begins to find out, someone perceived as senile cannot take offense at this perception without having this offense seem as evidence of his senility. Or as Goneril puts it, as an expression of the, quote, unruly waywardness that infirm and choleric years bring with them. Similarly, one may try to express just outrage at mistreatment, only to find one's outrage taken as puerile outburst. Lear is confronted here with the hard fact that we do not have complete control of what our actions mean, but instead must depend on others to take our actions in the way we try to mean them, and this in turn is a function of how others perceive us. If what our actions mean depends upon the identity we have, what is the king's noble anger is the daughter's puerile outburst, then what our actions are persistently taken to mean bleeds back into our own identity, including our self-identity. Hence Lear's plea to the gods, fool me not so much to bear it tamely, touch me with noble anger. He is rightly afraid he will succumb to his daughter's hermeneutics. Again, while there is a factual biological dimension to basic mental competence and senility, there are also negotiated facts that exist in a realm between the potentially senile person and those around him. This is why Goneril's insistence that Lear surround himself with knights who see him the same way that she does is so disturbing to Lear. If, quote, who is it that can tell me who I am, is the important question, then it will be important who you are surrounded with. If you're surrounded by 50 knights who see you as doddering, choleric old man, that will be a powerful force. As we've seen, Lear is constantly asking others who he is. There's no soliloquy in which Lear wonders aloud about his own identity, a striking absence in comparison to Shakespeare's other great tragedies in which Hamlet, Macbeth, and Othello all soliloquize. If a soliloquy shows a person negotiating his own identity with himself, or attempting to do this, Lear never does that, not even when apparently speaking alone, for then he takes himself to be speaking to the storm, or to nature, or to gods about himself. Even when Lear addresses no one in particular, his question is not, who am I? But rather, who is it that can tell me who I am? While Shakespeare's other tragedies also concern our vulnerability to others' views of us, King Lear takes this up in its starkest form, with a hero who himself grasps that vulnerability. Goneril's crude threat, quote, take the thing she begs, emphasizes Lear's newfound powerlessness and seems to hint that this powerlessness makes him especially vulnerable to hermeneutic attack. But it's important to see that this is a long-standing vulnerability for Lear. This is because his previous positions as powerful father and king also made him hermeneutically vulnerable. On the one hand, kings and fathers are figures of privilege whom others cannot ignore. On the other hand, they are figures related to most disingenuously, precisely because they have the most to give. For the otherwise privileged, the disingenuousness acts as a serious cost. Because traditional fathers are the lords and owners of their wallets, it is hardest for them to know, quote, what others truly think of them. This line of thought suggests the stark view that we can only be authentically related to insofar as we are powerless, and therefore that the authentic self is the something that comes from nothing. The warrant for this thought appears to come from France's embrace of the disenfranchised Cordelia and from Lear's attempt in the face of the storm to deconstruct himself, as it were, and therefore to reveal the authentically human as such. In our understanding of King Lear, what results from this attempt is not existential philosophic insight, but madness. And what this suggests is a tragic dynamic. On the one hand, I must be powerless in order for others to relate to me authentically, and therefore gain my authentic self. But if I am powerless, I will also appear to others as worth nothing, and invite abuse. And the fruit of abuse by those close to us is not authentic self, but madness. That is the loss of self. In King Lear, our hermeneutic vulnerability to others is not a condition that can be escaped. The powerless are victims of the hermeneutic attacks of the more powerful, and the powerful are victims of the deceitful and disingenuous relations of those who depend on them. And if you think that you can escape all this by escaping society altogether and rushing out into the storm of nature, then if Lear is indicative, you risk the complete destruction of your identity. In the argument we are developing, to know what others truly think of me isn't just something nice or interesting. To repeat, this is because who I truly am will not disentangle from how others take me, and especially the others who are close to me. Now, you'll probably recognize some Hegelian themes here, and they are indeed there, and we have a quote from Hegel this is a shout out to Hegel, all right? So this is quote number 9. Self-consciousness exists in and for itself when and by the fact that it so exists for another. That is, it exists only in being acknowledged. This is what we are saying about identity. It exists in being acknowledged. Okay. In this light, what having an authentic identity requires is that others relate to me in authentic, i.e. non-disingenuous ways. With the dilemma of kings and fathers in mind, we can see that Regan is onto something when she claims that even before his abdication, her father hath ever but slenderly known himself. It may be useful to pause now in order to consider our reading of the play in contrast to one of the most famous interpretations, Stanley Cavell's. Cavell begins by noticing the importance of motifs of eyes, sight, and vision in King Lear. According to his interpretation, many of the characters in the play are motivated by a desire to avoid being seen. When taken in its logical extreme, this desire means that we would rather blind those around us than risk being seen by them, as in the most shocking and brutal scene in King Lear, when Cornwall plucks out first one eye, then the other of Gloucester with Regan cheering him on. Cavell reads this as the original sin of all of us who want to avoid being seen, and notes how various other characters in the play participate in this original sin, either by verbally suggesting someone's eyes get plucked out, or by taking extreme measures to avoid being recognized or seen. In this influential reading, the apparent meaning of Lear's love test is turned on its head. While Lear is apparently trying to secure love, what he is actually trying to do is avoid it. The difficulty with this reading is that it assumes that the function of vision is to see some uncontested reality, and that the function of avoidance is to hide a reality that exists independently of others who see it. We are arguing, in contrast, that the crucial issue in King Lear is not that others are important because they might see you for what you are, but because how they see you determine who you are. Their sight of us has the power not just to reveal, but to shape. It is the even greater vulnerability, we think, that accounts for the extremity of Lear's reaction toward Cordelia in the love test.
Okay, we're in the home stretch. 2D, why does Lear reject Cordelia's gratitude? We have argued that Lear is involved in a hermeneutic struggle for his identity, that this struggle is especially fraught for Lear, both before and after he has given up his power. In this light, now let us return to Cordelia's offer of filial love based on gratitude. Consider the basics of gratitude. Gratitude is a response to a benefit. Since the benefit, whatever it is, has already been bestowed when gratitude is felt, gratitude is always a response to something in the past. What gratitude believes is that the past continues to be relevant now. Especially enduring gratitude of the kind Cordelia offers is felt for the greatest benefits of the past, the begetting, education, and love that bestow the gift of one's very self. The question is, what role does such a gratitude play in Lear's hermeneutic vulnerability? The answer might seem to be a positive one. Goneril and Regan want Lear to identify as a weak old man. Cordelia's gratitude, in contrast, holds on to the image of him as a powerful benefactor, and in her enduring gratitude says that that vision of him remains relevant to their relationship now. However, notice how the continuing relevance of these past selves can threaten our present understanding of ourselves. This is well recognized when the person involved is the beneficiary rather than the benefactor. For example, Aristotle's great-souled man would rather forget the benefits he has received than let go of his present interpretation of himself as self-sufficient. We think that King Lear shows that there is a danger to being remembered as a benefactor as well. If the currently strong don't want to be reminded of their former weakness, perhaps there's also some pain for the currently weak, or those on the brink of weakness, to be reminded of their past strength. To be honored on the basis of your past self is, after all, not to be honored for your present self. There's a way in which it's difficult for an elder colleague, for example, to be honored for her former accomplishments. If such honoring for past deeds is made explicit as the ground of an ongoing relationship, this suggests to the elder colleague that who she is now may be unappreciated. And the more personal and intimate the relationship at stake, the more problematic the appreciation of the past appears. Could honoring of the past accomplishments ground a lively conversation? Could it ground pleasure in each other's company? To return to what Cordelia omits from the marriage vow, is the benefactor cherished in the sense of loved for his very self now? Lear is anxious to hold on to his identity even as he gives up his power. By offering a relationship grounded in gratitude, what Cordelia says to him is, here is how I will love you, benefactor. But benefactor is precisely what Lear cannot keep on being, having given up his power. She's not offering to love Lear for who he can keep on being. Cordelia feeds his anxieties rather than assuages them. In summary, Lear rejects Cordelia's gratitude, not because it's unimportant, not because it's cold, but because it seems to honor him exclusively for who he was. Our hermeneutic vulnerability means that in an important way, our powers will be retained or lost, especially as we grow older, depending upon how others take us. It's not simply the case that Lear either is or isn't in his dotage. He descends to dotage when he's held to have done so by those close to him, and he avoids it when those close to him hold him as continuing to be who he was. What disturbs here is how splendid gratitude is, yet how limiting. Section 3.3, filial love as friendship. We have seen two answers to the question, what can ground filial love? The first, not taken very seriously by anyone in the play, is that it can be grounded in some sort of drive toward exclusive union like romantic love. The second, taken very seriously by the play but rejected by Lear, is that it can be grounded in filial gratitude. But there's one more vision of parent-child love that's given in the play. And this is the vision in Act 5, in which Lear paints a vivid picture to Cordelia of what their life will be like in prison. Reciting the whole passage, which is prompted by Cordelia's question, "Shall we not see these daughters and these sisters?" Lear replies, this is number 10 on your handout. No. Come, let's away to prison. We two alone will sing like birds in the cage. When thou dost ask me blessing, I'll kneel down and ask of thee forgiveness. So we'll live and pray and sing and tell old tales and laugh at gilded butterflies and hear poor rogues talk of court news. And we'll talk with them too, who loses and who wins, who's in, who's out, and take upon us the mystery of things as if we were God's spies. And we'll wear out in a walled prison packs and sects of great ones that ebb and flow by the moon. In the positive portrait of prison life alone together, Lear begins with Cordelia asking for his blessing, which he responds to by kneeling before her and asking for forgiveness. Looked at through the lens of power relations, Cordelia lowers herself and then Lear lowers himself. When the portrait continues, so we'll live, the mutual lowering appears as a kind of initiating ritual, a blessing forgiveness ritual that opens up the possibility of a new kind of relationship based on equality. The relationship of equality that Lear proposes is richly imagined, full of images of shared activities. They can pray together, sing together, tell old stories, and laugh together. They are entertained by those poor rogues caught up in the world of politics, which is a world full of change, depicted as no more significant to them than changes in fashion. There's a strong emphasis on the pleasures of shared conversation. When Lear adds that their shared activity rises up to take upon us the mystery of things, as if we were God's spies, we recognize clearly that what he's depicting is the contemplative life, only more colorful and especially more fun than the contemplative life is generally imagined to be. Aristotle says that it's characteristic of friends to share activities such as drinking, dice, or philosophy. And that activities friends share with each other show the things for whose sake they value life. In its colorful diversity of activities and emphasis on fun, it is as if Lear had portrayed a friendship full of drinking, dice, and philosophy. What is clear throughout is that their life together will make nothing happen. Trapped in prison, they are free to pursue activities for their own sakes. We are sure that our audience tonight sees the attractiveness of the portrait of the contemplative life. But the pressing question for our talk is this at last the compelling vision of parent-child love that we've been seeking in the play? A friendship of equality in a fun, contemplative life. Is this what parent-child love is or wants to be? Unfortunately, there are signs that it is not. Cordelia's question of whether they're going to see Regan and Goneril, and Lear's incredible emphatic no, suggests a difference of opinion. Cordelia's question suggests a continued interest in confrontation, and she indicates how she will hold her head high to them, although in military defeat. She does indeed have the pride Lear accused her of in Act 1. Lear's string of 4 no's, especially if read without an exclamation point, more like tisk, 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 tisk than anything desperate or despairing, he is, or he wants to be, beyond concern with Goneril and Regan, and he wants Cordelia to be too. He is, or he wants to be, beyond concern with seeing justice done, because he's beyond concern with seeing anything done, which Cordelia is not. She says, "We are not the first who with best meaning have incurred the worst." Their difference of opinion is reflective of the difference in their ages. At 80 years old, Lear has already lived his active life, and when the result disappoints, he decides in favor of the pleasures of contemplation. But Cordelia is much, much younger and has only just begun to live politically. She thinks her active life isn't over. Although fortune, as she says, frowns on her now, her powerful husband France is still out there. And fortune is notoriously reversible. As the play painfully shows, in their different ways, both Cordelia and Lear are deceived. Cordelia's defeat with dignity is about to be destroyed, in secret, by a man whose human dignity consists in the reflection that hanging a woman is a job for him because, after all, he isn't a horse, and so can't draw a cart nor eat dried oats. For his part, Lear's portrait that he and Cordelia can live a long life together through several regime changes, that they will be at liberty to take ironic pleasure in who's in and who's out, is painfully exploded. What they really have is less than 15 minutes together before who's in destroys them. But even if they had more time, Lear's vision of a contemplative friendship of equality seems to avoid the central question. If Lear's original question was the grounds of loving him as he slowly fails, the proposal of the pleasures of a shared contemplative life together does not answer that question, because the young Cordelia does not yet desire that life. Finally, in Lear's portrait of friendship, the fact that he is Cordelia's father seems to be no longer relevant. But it's always relevant. As a father of a child in distress, Lear should be thinking about how to protect her, rather than how to make humorous fun at the latest gilded court butterflies. Although unarmed and 80 years old, Lear has the power still to kill the man who hangs Cordelia. Is it wrong to think, therefore, that he might have protected her? Maybe that he might have protected her if his own vision of their vita contemplativa had held him in less of a reverie? If the question is whether parents and children can ever be friends, the answer may be yes, but that parenting will and should get in the way. Here's the conclusion. We have argued that King Lear contains 3 visions of happily ever after between parents and children. The almost romantic union offered by Goneril and Regan, the one based on filial gratitude offered by Cordelia, and the friendship imagined by Lear. Furthermore, we have argued that the play gives us ground to reject all these possibilities. We're left with the disturbing thought that there may not be a coherent happily ever after for parents and children. Does this mean that Lear's demand in his love test is an inappropriate one? Have we stumbled on Lear's fatal flaw so that King Lear can be understood as a morality play in which Lear is punished for desiring something impossible or unwise? We resist this view. The philosopher Bernard Williams says that, quote, philosophy, and in particular moral philosophy, is still attached to giving good news, and that tragic literature offers a, quote, necessary supplement and suitable limitation to the tireless aim of moral philosophy to make the world safe for well-disposed people. From Aristotle on, it's been a near article of faith for moral philosophy that the virtues maximize our chances of living a good life. The weak challenge to this view is that the virtues are simply, or by and large, irrelevant to leading a good life. tragedy offers a far more disturbing challenge. It is the virtues themselves that destroy us. When the terrible consequences depicted in tragedies are put down to a hero's flaw or mistake, or even, as Aristotle says in his second pass at the point, a great mistake, tragedy's disturbing power is neutered. What we have disturbingly argued in this talk is that Lear's apparently outrageous love test and his apparently irrational, furious rejection of Cordelia's speech of love are not mistakes at all. Rather, they spring from his perspicacious sense of a vulnerability we all share and come to feel more keenly as we grow older. And that they spring from his correct belief that the vulnerability should somehow be answered through love. We are protected from the shocking consequences that Lear suffers, not because of our own virtues relative to Lear's vices, but from our common weaknesses, if not vices, such as self-deception, self-surrender, or diffidence in the pursuit of a kind of love that as yet has no articulate form. Thank you for your attention.